Hello everyone, this is a quick little overview of error correction in L2 writing with a few tips and tricks. We all know what it feels like to be that teacher with the red pen in our hands, and a lot of us feel like our job is to correct every error that we see in our students' writing, and it gets really frustrating. I mean, we don't do that with students speaking, right? So why are we doing this, and why do we feel like we need to do this with our students' writing? Everyone knows that grammar Nazis are people that nobody likes. Someone who's always correcting other people's grammar and always making sure that other people know they made some mistakes. And it makes people feel pretty bad about themselves when we correct their grammar. I mean, students may feel like stupid or lose their confidence or have more anxiety about writing for you when you're going to be correcting every error. On the other hand, students do appreciate having their errors corrected. A lot of students say that they want their teachers to mark or correct all of their errors in their writing. Is that the best thing for our students? I don't think so. And the research shows that students really can't absorb all that information. So let's get into some more nuance. We don't have to be either a grammar Nazi or simply ignore our student errors. We can make considerate choices about what kinds of errors to correct and when to correct them and how to correct them. So I'm going to take you to a SlideShare presentation that I found online from one of my colleagues, and I thought it was really helpful. You can find the link to this in our module. So first of all, what types of errors do English language learners commonly make? There's certain types of errors that are very specific to non-native speakers, and we can think about, let me just go back one slide, the type of error that students make. Some errors are slips that students just made a mistake and they already know that and they can correct it themselves. Others are errors that they can't correct themselves because they don't know how to do it yet. Maybe they aren't at that point in their language acquisition. And finally, there's errors that students make because they're taking risks, because they're trying new things, and they need feedback on those in order to learn from the experience of trial and error. So it's not just practice that makes sense, but trial and error and getting feedback on the practice that one is engaging in. Some typical errors that language learners make are noun errors like articles and plurals. We all know those. Errors with verbs, verb tense, and verb form. Errors with subject-verb agreement. Word choice is very difficult, and especially not just word choice, but also using the word correctly and using the word form correctly. Sentence structure is another big one, especially for advanced learners when they start experimenting with more complex sentence structures. And there are also errors that native speakers make as well. So all of those kinds of errors are mistakes in the learning process that our students can learn from. So how can we best help them to make the most of those trial and error processes to learn the best possible? Well, there are different types of feedback that we can choose to make. One is direct feedback, when the teacher just directly makes the correction, similar to this meme that we saw at the beginning of the presentation, where this guy is actually writing the correct forms above the word that was incorrect. That's a direct correction. Indirect correction, the teacher points out the error but doesn't necessarily supply the correct form. So we have to decide direct or indirect feedback. And I think direct feedback is more for when learners may not know what was incorrect about their grammar. And indirect feedback, you know that it was a mistake, or you know that they should know how to correct that themselves. Another choice we have to make is between comprehensive and selective feedback. So comprehensive is when you correct all of the errors. And actually, although students say that's what they want, it's rather rare for us to do that. We're not their editors. We're not there to just correct everything they say. And selective feedback is the more common way of doing things and the more helpful, beneficial way. That we mark certain patterns of errors or certain types of errors based on what we think will be most beneficial for our learners. Explicit and implicit is another choice we can make, whether we indicate the specific type of error or just underline it in more general implicit ways. I want to turn to this article that I found online, which is teaching tips for people who are teaching in a writing lab. And writing labs typically don't want to correct all the errors that learners make because they say they're not editors and they're not there to proofread students' writing, but to help students improve their own writing. So instructors often notice that grammatical problems abound and that papers are filled with errors when they are grading them. And so they may feel like they need to mark every error, but do students really read these comments and learn from them? What really happens? That's the question. Correcting errors for students will probably not help them to learn to correct the errors themselves. Only the most conscientious students will pore over your comments and reach for the grammar handbooks for additional information. Where every error is marked, the students will believe that the instructor has done all of the work and that little revision is necessary beyond the corrections. So correcting every error is not necessarily the best for the students. Another downfall to correcting every single error is that it can end up taking the focus of your comments away from more important or equally important issues of content and organization. That's why this quarter we're looking at the traits of writing. So you can focus on different traits at different times. Grammar and language is not the only thing we should be looking at in our students' writing or commenting upon. So we try to attend to other aspects of student writing. How can we better help our students eliminate the errors in the writing? Put the responsibility on the students. It's found that students can catch more than 60% of their own errors if they are taught to proofread and are held accountable for correctness in their writing. So we need to teach them strategies and techniques for how to engage in proofreading and in correcting their own errors, in finding their own errors. When it comes time to grade student essays, instead of marking every single error, try any of the following messages. Mark errors on the first page only. That might be a good place to start, especially with really advanced students who only have a small number of errors. You can mark representative errors. This is where we get into a pattern of errors, the types of errors that we're choosing to mark. Or place checks in the margins where errors occur. Refer students to a page in a specific grammar handbook. Those are different ways that we can comment on our students' writing. So going back to the types of feedback that we can give, if we look at which errors we should be correcting, there are 3 different types of errors that researchers in this field usually look at. One is serious or global errors. Those are errors that make it difficult to understand what the heck they're trying to say. And they're serious because they really impede the meaning. They don't let us understand what it means. A global error is more something that affects the writing at a broader scale than just the sentence. It might impact the whole paragraph or the whole cohesion of the larger piece. So that's a global area. A pattern of frequent errors is one where they may be smaller errors, but they're occurring over and over. So this is a good learning opportunity because it's obviously a place where the student, because they make that mistake repeatedly, it's something that they have, missed out on or gotten wrong up until now. And something like the other day I saw in one of my students' papers a lot of verb tense errors. So just using like past tense versus present tense, like it was really an issue in almost every single verb. So I could take that and say, okay, let's work on verb tense. Let's look at why something would be in the present versus the past. And I can get the student to focus on verb tense when she's reading over her paper. So that's a pattern of frequent errors. And again, you want to focus on things that make sense. You want to set goals that are realistic. Correcting every single article error is really not where you want to go with this. I mean, articles are the most difficult thing in the English language, and so it's almost impossible to correct those errors. And it gets really frustrating when teachers are constantly mentioning it. Another way to focus is a stigmatizing error that would cause readers to, somehow stigmatize the writing of the learner. We have to be careful and sensitive with this one. But this is an area where if the writing could benefit from, for example, helping the student to make their writing more formal in an academic setting, that kind of thing can really help the learner to come across in the way that they wish to come across with their readers. So that was a brief overview of error correction in second language writing. Our chapter, Ferris and Hedgecock, has much more detail, and there are more resources also in our module that you might want to check out. You might want to come back to this slide share and look through the whole 49 slides. It's really an interesting presentation. So thanks for listening, and I hope to talk with you guys soon.